Welcome, everybody. My name is Catherine Haas, and I'm going to read excerpts from my book. It happened some 70 plus years ago on a windy May morning in a country on the other side of the world. But I remember it as if it were yesterday. It was 1949, and I was walking into my 5th grade classroom in Shanghai, China, with my friend Li Jiatong, when I said, "My father says that communism would be a horrible outcome for our country." Just as I was finishing my sentence, Jiatong noticed that teacher Xia abruptly putting down her attendance booklet and running over to us. She grabbed me from the behind, covered my mouth, and dragged me into the hallway. I was terrified. A million thoughts went into my head. Were we late for class? Did teacher Xia find out about the wrestling match that I organized at my house yesterday after school? I knew that we weren't allowed to wrestle at school, but I thought it was okay to do it at my house. What had I done wrong? Was I in trouble? Xiaoyu, little Jade, teacher Xia almost shouted, although she was trying to whisper, "Don't ever talk about politics in school. If a classmate heard you, he might tell his parents. Your father's opinion might get your entire family arrested. Times are dangerous. A civil war is approaching our city. Shanghai could possibly be taken over by communist forces soon. Do you understand?" "Yes, teacher Xia," I answered, but I didn't understand it really. I looked up at my beloved teacher, relieved not to be in trouble and grateful for that. Instead of punishing me, she was trying to keep my family safe. When I read this, usually to American audience, I tell them how lucky they are to be here, and they can say whatever they feel like about Trump or about Kamala Harris, and they're not going to get arrested, and they don't have to look around to see who might be listening to them. And that's a gift, I think, as good as air and water, in my opinion. And so later that evening, my father is speaking. "If communists take over, your mother and you 3 will be in danger. They are blaming many of China's ills on foreigners. It was foreign countries that brought opium to China and drugged our people. When we tried to stop them, they brought their warships to fight against us and won. Communists want revenge against the foreigners, and your lives would be in danger if they won." "But where is Xiao? We are Chinese," Xiao Hu, Xiao Pangzi, and I shouted in protest. "In their eyes, you 3 are half German, which means you are foreigners." "But where will we go?" little Xiao Pangzi asked. His face, usually so cheerful, looked distressed. Baba sighed. "Maybe the United States of America. Our good friends, the Kutners, live in Washington, D.C., and they have offered to host our family for as long as it is needed. However, Americans don't want more Chinese people in their country. We might try to get you 3 passports under Muti's German citizenship." That year, a while before America adopted a more liberal immigration system, only 105 Chinese were allowed to enter as permanent residents. "Wouldn't you come with us?" I asked. "No," Baba said, lowering his shoulders and sighing. "I can't abandon my country. I was raised to lead it." The idea of leaving Baba behind frightened me. He was the one who held me in his lap when company came, telling them that I was his favorite child. It was marvelous. Baba's affection made me feel as charming or intelligent as my siblings. It's a year later, and I'm entering junior high school after having been in America for a year. On the first morning of middle school, a young new teacher in an elegant gray suit, a starch white shirt, and a blue silk tie walked into our classroom. he wrote his name on the blackboard, all in capital letters, Mr. Landis. Smiling, he said, "That's my name, children. This is my first day teaching. Please sit down." Almost all the students stood up, but I sat down obediently. When I saw all my classmates defy the new teacher, I joined them by standing up. For once, I had purposely acted badly, and it was truly one of the most joyous moments of my life. I felt powerful for the first time. Mr. Landis stood there wordlessly. We all broke out in laughter, even Mr. Landis, who asked us once more to sit down. We complied. He called the roll, and when it got to my last name, HSU, he didn't know how to pronounce it, and he asked me, and I said, "It is pronounced Xu." It's like the French U or the German U sound. Most Americans can't say that sound, so you can just say Shu, which is okay. I knew everyone had trouble with my last name. They didn't know what to do with the initial letter H. Some people pronounce my name as Hasu, and I accepted that because it felt useless to correct them. As I entered school on the third day, I saw some classmates sitting on the wall which bordered the school. "Hi, Catherine Shit," the boys called out. "Hi," I replied, happy that my classmates were trying to pronounce my last name correctly. The boys laughed, and I laughed too, thinking they were trying so hard. Every morning for the next few weeks, the boys all happily greeted me with Catherine Shit, and I happily greeted them back. And when my friend Maya finally heard it and told me what it meant, I was mortified. The next morning, I tried a different route to enter the school in order to avoid those horrid boys. But during recess, they taunted me, repeating their nasty name, calling me over and over, laughing all the while. When I got home that afternoon, I looked in the bathroom mirror at the shape of my slanted eyes. If only my eyes were round, I thought, that would look like everyone else in class and no one would tease me. So I pulled and I stretched my eyes this way and that without success. They just snapped back to the original shape. I was ugly, and there was nothing I could do about it. Walking out of the bathroom, I slammed the door, and some of my anger dissipated with the sound of the door slamming. Though I still felt angry at not being accepted, angry at looking different, angry about not being accepted. And then after about a year at Kew Gardens, we moved to an apartment on 3010 R Street. The new apartment on the third floor in a row of apartments was much nicer and cost less. Across the street was a cemetery where George, that's my little brother, would sneakily take the fresh flowers left there and bring them home for Mutti. Next to the cemetery was a recreation center and a large field for games. And next to the recreation center was the beautiful gardens of Dumbarton Oaks, a sprawling public park with terrace gardens and vistas, and wooded kitchen gardens and a vast wilderness of meadows and wooded pathways, as well as a museum. There was also an unused swimming pool, and a large fence prevented people from entering except by official entrance. Our family found another entrance along the edge of the park, which turned out to be a great place to hide Easter eggs on Easter Sunday, when there was a large sign saying $30 fine for picking flowers. Mutti would pick a bouquet and bring them home saying, "Look, I got some $30 flowers for us." Joan and George thought it was a great joke, but I didn't like the idea of dishonesty. Maybe my desire to be honest came from my new interest in religion. None of us children had been baptized. My father, my Chinese father, didn't care about religion, and Mutti was raised in a heavy-duty Lutheran atmosphere in Berlin and wanted to spare her children that oppressive religious upbringing. Now, this is close to the end of high school, and I'm at a church gathering. At the end of the summer, the church sent me out for a week's retreat to a place in Virginia called Shrimont in the Shenandoah Valley near the George Washington National Forest. It was to strengthen our faith. It was so enchanting that I vowed one day to have my wedding in that beautiful outdoor chapel there. Ironically, when I planned my wedding 2 years later, I learned that because I was half Asian, I was considered colored, and it was against the law for me to marry a white boy in Virginia. It never dawned on me that as an Asian, according to the Virginia law, I was not good enough to marry a white man. That United States, that law was finally overturned in the mid-1960s. To think that in the United States for so long, interracial marriages were a thing to avoid at all costs. What were the lawmakers afraid of? Why would anybody care about the color of one's skin or the slant of one's eyes? What was it exactly that people disliked or feared? One of the first activities was at the retreat was an icebreaker, a get to know each other game. All the students gathered in a large recreation room, and the leaders, who were Episcopal priests, had names of well-known people, places, or things written on cards in the front of the Bible. They attached the card to the back of each student, and our job was to walk around and ask different kids yes or no questions about the cards on our backs. Before the game began, I noticed one priest at the far end of the room who kept staring at me. Once the rules of the game were explained, the priests got up from their seats and began placing cards on our backs. This particular priest, who had his eyes on me, ran across the room to tack his card on my back before another leader did. I wondered why it was so important to have that particular card. And I had to ask many questions before I found out. The card said, "Snake who tempted Adam and Eve." Even now, I wonder what the priest had in mind when he put that card on my back. Did he see me as a temptress? Did he see me as evil? Was it because I was Chinese? It happened so long ago, but it still bothers me to this day. Being treated poorly by cruel, racist classmates and teachers undermined my fragile ego and shook my self-confidence time and again. But with the consistent kindness of adults and friends, I was not only able to gain my confidence, but I became proud of being biracial. And because of the pain I suffered, I was able to recognize that pain in many of the students I taught at summer camps in Vermont, in New York, and Solon School on the Standing Rock Reservation in North Dakota, in a key school in Annapolis, Maryland, and to use that knowledge to support my students and to encourage their strengths. So that's my
Yeah, here's the first question.
Okay.
About what this moment presenting your memoir at JF Books means to you. Like, how do you feel right now?
This is really weird, right? Because in my book, I quote Allende, Isabel Allende, because she expresses so beautifully, when you dig up a tree and you transplant it, the roots hold on to that dirt, right? No matter what. And when you transplant, that dirt is still there. So I'm thinking, when I got transplanted from Shanghai to here, that part of Shanghai is here. It's never gonna go anywhere. This is part of me, right? And DC is my first home when I came to the United States. And now I'm 87, so at the end of life, God knows if I'll make it to tomorrow, but sort of the beginning of my life was DC, and I left Shanghai, which was my home. And now I'm here at the end of my life, and somehow Shanghai has come here. It's very, very wonderful. A little bit of Shanghai to the city where I started. So it's like the mountains come to Muhammad. So yes, so it's wonderful to be here.
And here comes to my second question. You also lived in Chongqing for a while and to Shanghai, and you came to US 1949. And your grandpa, Xu Shuzhen, was a high-rank military officer under Duan Qirui, if you have heard about him, who invaded Outer Mongolia. And your father was also an ambassador to Italy, I think, in Rome.
Yes.
And he's also a high-rank Kuomintang, Guan Yuan, a high-rank military officer. But your dad stayed in China when you and your siblings and your mother came to the United States. And you, as informed by your memoir, you had a really hard time being separated from your dad, from your family, from your life in Shanghai.
Yeah.
And in some sense, as you said, China or Shanghai is a place for your childhood. After all these years, how do you view your relationship with China right now? Is it still regarded as your hometown for some sense? And thinking about the current dominant discourses around China in the US, what kind of fresh perspective you think you could offer to our readers from your personal experience, your personal connection with China?
It was hard leaving Shanghai, and I went back twice. First with my first husband, and wandered all around. I wanted to find the places, and we found neither one. But I really just wanted to say goodbye, because when I left, I thought we would go back in a very, very short time. So I didn't bring anything that I cared about. I brought my school books, because I thought I didn't want to get behind. So anyhow, and I said to God, if I could just go back and say goodbye, then I could die. So we come back the first trip from China, and our plane is flying into Chicago, and it says we cannot land. The airport is there for 40 minutes. And I thought, okay, this is when we're gonna die. And then I thought, God, could I have a rain check? I know I just wanted to get back to China, and then I'd be happy with dying. And then with my family, we went back again. 17 family members about 10 years ago. And the thing is, I wanted to go back to my home, and it's crazy, right? Because the Shanghai I left in 1949 is not the Shanghai that's there now, right? Everything is different. So it really hit me, you can't go home. So I keep that Shanghai here. And so when I read about China, and the Chinese do something wonderful, I go, yay, I'm Chinese. And then when I hear something not good, I'm going to go, oh, why? Or when a Chinese gets arrested in the United States, I'm thinking, no good, you're bringing shame on all of us. We need to be the best citizens to prove to the Americans that we're the smartest, we're the nicest, and none of us are in jail. So.
To quote from your book, there's a passage on you learning English as a second language here.
Right.
There are very powerful moments narrated in your book. And also you started to pick up Chinese a little bit in high school and from a tutor. And you said, quote, the beautiful language comes back to you again. And can you tell us a little bit more, what's the beauty of the language for you?
The best thing about Chinese is the grammar. We don't have plural, we don't have singular, we don't have future, we don't have past, we don't have masculine and feminine, and there's no conjugation. It is so wonderful. One of the biggest regret I had was losing the language. Right? As long as I was dating boys during my teenage years, I could kind of keep it, but with nobody else. And then I married at 20, and I tried to teach my husband German and Chinese, and then he would make funny mistakes, and I'd laugh, which is not a good way to teach anybody. So I gave it up. And when I was about 60 and I was teaching, and there were many people who were adopting little Chinese children.
Yes.
And when an American adopts a Chinese child, they have to promise to raise that child in the language and the culture. Well, there's nobody in Annapolis, so they said to me, you have to teach Chinese. I said, I left when I was 11, I only stayed there 7 years, and I have the vocabulary of a 3-year-old. They said, you can do it, you can do it. So I started teaching the adopted Chinese kids, thinking it would come back. And you know what? Some of it did come back. And so what I did is I thought, okay, these kids have Chinese blood. There's nothing better than Chinese blood. But they're coming in America where they have so many advantages. So what are they missing? They're missing a Chinese grandmother who would tell them stories. So every week when they came, I would teach them to read and write the words, but also one week I would focus on Chinese legends, so they would know that. And then the next week we would work on brush painting, because that's a wonderful culture. So we did brush painting. God, they made some beautiful things. And calligraphy, so we used the ink slates. That was another. And then another week we would work on cooking. So I taught them to make jiaozi and mantou and the little kids, the parents going, whoa, and the children say, chicken, oh, it's okay. No, I said, no, you can. So I had them cook every week, once a month cooking, once a week legends, once a week writing, and once a week games. So that we taught them the hacky sack, to play Go, and the beanbag game. So we would play games. Then when there's an extra week, I had a store. So I bought all kinds of things, and I ran off fake Chinese money and all, and then I put prices. So if it was 10 yuan, I had the kid come up with their little fake money, and I taught them to say, I'll give you 5 yuan, and I'd look really mad. And then I would say, okay, 9 yuan, and then they would say 6. I taught them to bargain. It was so cute because some of the kids were hoarding their fake money, and I wanted to have them have little presents, right? And they would keep saving it. What's good for nothing, right? So finally found out from the parents, okay, this kid loved little fancy pencils. So I bought little fancy pencils so that kid would not be hoarding this goofy Monopoly money. And I taught those kids for about 10 years. So many of them call me grandmother, and I feel like I'm still in touch with a whole bunch of them, and just because they're mine. When I started teaching, I taught them not the simplified, but the other, because that's what I knew, but it was so hard that I switched over to learn the simplified because it was just much easier.
You said, I think in the book, English is actually your sixth or fifth language, right?
Yeah, if I call French, Italian, Chongqing, Shanghai,
Mandarin.
English is sixth.
Sixth, yeah. So what is the writing experience like for you? Is it joyful? Do you feel like you're still writing in a foreign language, or English also becomes one of your native tongues?
Learning English was not joyful. And I'm thinking learning any of those was not joyful. I think because I kept getting switched to different places with completely not understanding anything over and over and over and over again. I think because of that, I've always bothered if I don't understand a language, which is why I think when we moved to the Indian reservation, I learned Lakota. Okay, and when I was teaching and I wanted to teach a culture on the Middle East for my students, I decided, well, let me learn Arabic. So I studied Arabic for 11 years. So I love languages because I want to understand. So right now on Duolingo, I'm doing 6 languages. And at the college, I'm taking 2 French classes, 3 Spanish classes, 2 sign language classes. I want to learn languages, and now it's very joyful to be learning languages. And with my husband, who's a Spanish teacher, so we read a Spanish novel every day for about a half an hour aloud, so I can practice now. What's not joyful, it's become my passion now. And I'm lousy at all of them, I just need to explain that. And when I write this book, is it in my native language? I don't know what my native language is, but English right now is the one I write the best in, and it's still lousy. So when I finish writing, I give it to my husband. He takes out the Chinglish and send it to another friend who fixes it a little better, and then I send it to my wonderful publisher to see if she likes it well enough to publish my book.
This is a quote from the review from Helen Xia, the author of Last Boat Out of Shanghai's epic story of the Chinese who fled Mao's revolution. She said, always too European to be Chinese and too Chinese to be European. Little Jade's enchanting story of resilience inspires with its honesty and optimism. So this is the question. How would you describe your Europeanness, Chineseness, and perhaps Americanness? How do you think they coexist in you and construct your identity?
It's certainly in China, people treated me differently, but the kids said I smelled bad because I don't know if you Americans know, but the Chinese, we don't need deodorant. They don't smell, okay? But I got my German sides. So the kids tease me about smelling like a foreigner. And then I come to the United States, I'm too Chinese. Even a few months ago, I was at the park as a volunteer, and somebody said, "Do you have a liver disease?" I said, "What?" She says, "Do you have a liver disease?" I said, "Why?" She said, "Your skin is so yellow." I said, "I'm Chinese." So to me, Chinese are very, very quiet, very sedate. I'm way too loudmouthy to be a Chinese. In fact, I married an American with a German descent. My Chinese father said, "He's much more Chinese than you are," because he thinks 10 times before he opens his mouth, and I just blabber whatever comes to my head. So I don't know where I fit in, but it seems like in nowhere do I quite fit.
So, as a Eurasian who came to the U.S. with no prior knowledge of American or of what American life was like, who speaks no English at all in the beginning, you experienced a lot of moments of like racial injustices, including like racist slurs you just quoted, and also institutional discrimination on people of color. How did you navigate through those moments of psychological violence? And what's your experience like with a Chinese face in the 1950s? Because it's a lot more different from nowadays.
There was so little interracial marriage that when I was first married, people would say to me, "Was your husband in the military on an island and there were no white people for him to marry?" Now there are many more mixed marriages. That makes me happy because I think the world's gonna be peaceful when everybody is sort of cafe au lait colored. It seems to me you have two choices. When you have nasty things going at you, you can just shrink from it, or you have to get over it, right? And you have to deal with it somehow. Let it bother you or not let it bother you. I was never any good at not letting it bother me. And that was too bad. I'm not strong enough to just let it go. So yes, when people said hurtful things, I hurt. But I think I didn't let it keep me from hurting because there were so many other good things in my life. Always there were good things. And I think that's the only way to navigate, right? Otherwise I just hide in a closet and close the door. And that's no good. It's no fun either.
And when do you feel like you started to reach the reconciliation with your face, with your color, with your racial identity?
You know, there was a movie that came out called A Many Splendored Thing, and the star was a Eurasian. And all of a sudden, I'm at the bus stop and people say, "Are you a Eurasian?" It's like, "I'm a Eurasian." It was like the first time I was an okay person instead of trying to hide, or people would come and say, "What are you?" Because I didn't fit into it. But when that movie came out, all of a sudden, at least some people recognized me. And I think partly because of some of my high school friends who encouraged me and who supported me and told me that I was okay. And some said I could get any boy to take me out that I wanted, and that was crazy. So I flirted, and by gum, it worked. So it was really support of my friends, I think, that made me feel okay.
I read your book, and it's so warm it's such a warm and precious narrative, like under the category of immigrant story, because a lot of the book narrative was just painful, heartbreaking, but yours is just with humor and the warmth and optimism, and I also would say hope. Where do you think that kind of optimism comes from, and how do you keep your spirit always uplifted?
This is a beautiful world. This is a wonderful country, and it's not perfect, right? And there's many, many things wrong, and I can say that. But there are always good things there if you look for it, right? Right? There's no way you can walk around the block without seeing something beautiful, without hearing a bird that's just singing to you, right? Or you look at this little plant that's, even in the wintertime, that's coming up saying, "Hey, here I am." It's way more fun to be an optimist than it is to be a pessimist.
Do you think if your multicultural identity have an impact on how you showed up in the classroom, and vice versa? How do you think your teaching kind of influenced your writing? Do you have a target audience, such as your students, in your mind when you were writing this memoir? Yeah.
I wrote the book thinking I wanted to get, because there was during COVID so much Asian hate against Chinese for causing COVID or whatever it is. And my daughter said, why don't you write your memoir to try to reach those kids, to say, you know what, it's hard, but there are people who will support you, and it's a wonderful country to grow up in. And you need to be proud of being Chinese and never sort of hide from who you are. So that was my target. But so far, it's all the older people are saying, oh, I love your book, I got 3 more copies, I bought 5 copies. So I'm trying to get into the schools, and it has certainly the multiculturalism, I think, has impacted me as a teacher. When I started teaching at Key School, this is 1974, it was kind of a hippie school, so there was no curriculum. And my partner and I decided to teach reading by finding wonderful novels in other cultures. So I taught a Chinese unit, and I used a book that was about World War I, House of 60 Fathers, when Americans came to help us during the World War II. Actually, it was interesting because at a part where there was a Japanese tank and it got blown up, and the kids went, yay! I said, no, not yay. And yes, we're reading a book that's pro-Chinese, but what about the Japanese guy? Did he really want to be there? What about his mom? What about his kids? War is horrible, and you need to grow up and figure out a way to solve problems without a war. And then one of the kids said, no, Mrs. Haas, war is really good because we can sell a lot of weapons and make a lot of money. All the other kids shouted at this one boy who thought war was really good. When I taught New Zealand Maori units, so we read Maori myths, and I taught them to count in Maori, and we do the haka, the war dance, and I did a shadow puppet for the myths, and played the lummi sticks. So when I did the Chinese unit, we did cooking and the brush painting, and so when I did the Native American unit, I taught them to do the Native American dance, how to do the beading, and to speak in Lakota. When I taught the Arabic unit, then I taught them to write their names in Arabic. Their math, they were using the Arabic numerals, they were all funny. During those units, we spent like 8 weeks completely with music, art, food. And to me, I wanted them to realize that they're all different cultures in this world, and they're all wonderfully beautiful. And the children got to choose, because my partner would do an Egyptian unit or Aborigine unit of Australia. And so we just had one on the Dominican Republic, so that the kids got to choose what they wanted to learn, and by learning how to read, we're also learning something about the culture. And a whole lot of my students write back and say, I've become an anthropologist because of what I was learning in 4th grade.
The 2 times you go back to China, first with your first husband, second with your family, it's a beautiful memory or something different?
For many, many years, I wanted to go back, and I was very jealous of everybody who went back because we couldn't afford it. There was one time we got a job. I said to my husband, if I could just live in China for 1 year, we would come back. So we applied, and we got a job to Chengdu for a year to teach scientists, college-age science teachers. Okay, we were going to teach English. And the salary was pretty lousy, but bearable. And our 3 girls had just gone to college, so but the thing is, the trip was going to be really expensive. So we had a telegram saying we got the job. And so I said, yes, but will you pay for transportation? And we got the telegram back and said, yes, we have bicycles for each of you. So they were going to pay for transportation from where we live to the university, but not from the United States to China, and we couldn't afford that. Plus, so we did not go. Anyhow, when we finally went, and I'm thinking it was shortly after they opened up, because everybody was going on a tour, but I arranged just the 2 of us to arrive to Shanghai. And a student had found his teacher to greet us, which was really good because she took us to the schools. And then we got in a cab all around Shanghai. I knew that we lived on Lafayette Avenue, but the street names changed. So I would have the cab stop and I would walk around and they stopped me because I'm not supposed to be in that neighborhood, and I had to meet the sort of the king of the neighborhood who questioned me, who are you, why are you doing here? I couldn't find the house, but we visited schools and I was very impressed, incredibly impressed with the schools. But the elementary school is really quite dirty, but the children clean up, right? And then the teachers said that these children, there were only one child allowed, were all spoiled brats because they didn't like the food or whatever. I was very impressed with the middle school. We went to visit and they said, oh, you want to visit that class? They were all prepared. My husband said, no, I want to see. So they brought him to a class and it was the kids, there were like 50, 60 kids, and they answered in unison instead of raising their hand. And my husband understood because of math. And it was not prepared, like we walked in. It was the most beautiful. Every child sat forward, engaged, right? Unlike schools here, where half the kids were asleep. Middle school kids. Anyhow, very, very impressed, but we didn't find my house. And then we went to Chongqing and they drove us all around and around. I said, we live on Koloshan. And then they found the mountain and they thought, I said, you know, we were foreigners and my father worked for Jiang Kai-shek. And so they said, oh, it's probably this house. And they made the people leave the house so we could visit it. And I couldn't remember because it was so long ago. And I took pictures and then I sent it to my relatives when we got here. They said that wasn't it. But it was close enough. And there were all these azaleas. When I went with my family, my sister brought us to the house in Shanghai that we lived in. And the man actually let us go into the backyard. And my little brother said out on the sidewalk, he said, oh, this is where I peed. And I looked for my school, I couldn't find my school, but it was a real closure for me to see the house that I had wanted to see.
Looking back at the year 1949, if you could make a choice, whether you would choose to leave or to stay?
In 1949, I think I was always closer to my father than my mother. My mother criticized me completely all the time, always telling me how stupid I was and how I wasn't good enough. And maybe she was encouraging me, or maybe she was just ashamed that I was stupid. I don't know. I think my father really loved me. And I was angry at him for a long time because my mother had said when he decided to stay, what's more important to you, your country or your family? And he said, my country. I was really angry. But as I got older, the Chinese are raised that way. Country comes first, family comes second, and you yourself counts as nothing. Right? So he chose what he was raised to be. When he was in Taiwan and he couldn't get out, and he begged my mother to bring us back. Many years later, I said to my mother, did you not go back because you didn't love my father, or did you not, or what? And she said, if I brought you back to Taiwan when it was really, really crowded, only 1 out of 7 kids could get to school, she said, the United States was a better place to raise you 3 kids. I chose that. When I was 20-something, and my father comes for the first time, and a week later, my mother and my stepdad came to visit me. And I said, why did you divorce my papa? He's the most wonderful man in the world. And my mom sat down and she sobbed. So she did not go back because she didn't love my dad. She stayed here because this is a better place to get an education. In 1949, if I knew I wasn't ever going to go back, I think I would have chosen to stay. But what I read is that children who were of mixed race, when the communists took over, many were tortured and many were killed because we had Western blood and we were the icky people. We were the people who caused all the problems. So I think if I had chosen to stay, I would have been sorry. And I do love this country and I do love my 2 husbands, and I'm really happy I have my 3 kids here. All 3 have PhDs. Oh.